Hey folks, welcome to the next episode of The Main Scoop. With me is my co-host, Daniel Newman.
Hey Greg, how are you? It's good to be back.
Good, yeah. We're gonna have a good conversation today, and it's gonna be all about relationships, right? I mean, we've kind of developed a bond doing this. We talk about technology, we talk about business, we talk about impact on the world, and the reality is business is way more than just technology or the particular product or service that you're delivering. There's an element or a component that's about relationship. And I believe this is pervasive across all industries.
It absolutely is. And in some industries more than others, I think we are discovering the importance of companies being able to put their focus on relationships first. In an era where we no longer always have the face-to-face time that we have with our audience, with each other, we end up having to find new ways, digital experiences, you know, on our devices, which I'm sure isn't far away from you right now, whether it's on your PC, in your pocket. But yeah, I mean, we are in the era of experience, and this isn't really a new thing, but given that we've been talking about it for so long, it does amaze me at times, Greg, that we still haven't solved it.
And when you do it right, it makes a huge difference. I mean, you know, if I think about the travel industry, I had an experience where I had a really tight connection, and I was stressing out. I was kind of switched. I was going with a different carrier than I had been for a while, but I was flying internationally, I was making a connection, I had less than an hour connection, and I'm thinking, oh my God, how am I gonna make it? So I get off the plane, and right when you get off, you know, you've got that area with the door where they bring up luggage and everything. There's somebody standing there with a tablet, and it's got my name on it, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what did I do wrong? Did they cancel my flight? And they're
You
like,
knew.
I didn't. And they're like, hey, you know, are you, you know, I pointed, I'm like, yeah, that's me, I'm Lotko. They literally took me down that side door, didn't even have to go up the bridge. Down at the bottom is a brand new Porsche Cayenne. They load my luggage in, and they drove me to the next gate, brought me right to the plane. I went up the stairs, got on my plane, and I was like, oh my God, this is a fabulous experience. And I gotta tell you, that's my primary carrier now. That experience, that relationship really drove a difference in how I thought about conducting business going forward.
Yeah, and you know, there's some really interesting stats out there about kind of how a good experience drives a buying decision and loyalty over time.
Yeah.
There's also some really interesting data about bad experiences, and it's like a 4-to-1.
Right.
Now again, they say a lot of stats are made up on the spot. I don't have the exact number, so I want to be clear about that. But it's something like a bad experience gets shared about 4 times more.
I've heard as much as 10,
Yeah.
so I would easily agree with 4.
Yeah, so we can go with that. But
it makes you wonder, right? If something that simple is getting messed up, are they going to lose pennies, dollars?
These are big companies.
I mean, yeah.
They should know what they're doing.
So, shifting to banking and thinking about this, let me pull in our guest. We have with us Iain McCorquodale. He is the global head of core banking at NatWest, and I'm sure you folks have an opinion. I know you're focused on this. Tell us a little bit about what you do at NatWest and how, you know, what your thoughts are on relationship
They can
banking.
get me my mail, right?
Probably.
Okay.
So thank you for having me along. So a little bit of context then, firstly, for NatWest. So NatWest is a UK bank. It's the #1 business bank in the UK. Just for scale and context, we have about 20 million customers. In terms of those moments that matter and the opportunity to mess up those moments that matter, we transact about 200 million inquiries, 50 million payments a day, and on a daily basis we move about $1 trillion a day in sheer capital. So by definition, that's a lot of opportunities to either do a fantastic job or a terrible job as a bank, and then scale that across the industry. The bank's strategy is driven around being a relationship bank for a digital world, and then we expand out from there, but clearly it's about a recognition that, to your point, relationships are at the heart of everything in those moments that matter. And it's about being with their customers through their whole life.
There's that start, there's that opening that first account as a kid where you're saving pennies to buy a toy or something. Then there's saving for university, there's going off to school, there's buying a house, getting married, whatever, saving for your own kids' education, right?
No, you're absolutely spot on. The key thing has been there for an entire lifetime of banking, not just the day you open a bank account. So it's interesting.
That's
Daniel
a partner. That's a relationship.
Well, it is, and Daniel talked about his willingness or desire to maybe move bank based on an experience, which ironically should be an easy to fix experience.
Should have been.
But traditionally people of my generation, and I say that carefully, tend not to move bank. They tend to be sticky. Once you're there, you're there. And then I think historically it's been easy to take that for granted. But as you say, it's now about being there where people need us to be as a banking industry. So if you're a student, how do we support a student lifestyle? But we assume a customer's a customer all the way through, or have traditionally done that. But clearly, a 4-year-old child knows nothing about banking. And if you take that back a few generations, we all learnt banking because we watched our parents bank. We understood how they operated. Clearly now, there's a lesser flow of knowledge. So we've got an accountability to teach, to show people things. So that's how we build relationships, to take a youth account, which will become maybe a student account, which may become a family account, which may become and all the way through to the lifestyle of I'll eventually retire and then I can relax and it's all good.
It's interesting when I think about that, because I hadn't thought about, we watch our parents bank and that's how we learn. And if you think about what a lot of our primary interface is with the bank now is our cell phone or our mobile device, it's usually our kids that understand how to use the latest and greatest mobile devices better than we do. So interesting challenge. But we kind of think about this and we see it going on across all industries. I mean, what consumers expect is a quick, tailored, targeted service, totally personalized to them, and to have it available wherever, whenever, at any hour. And it's the world we're living in now.
And I think personalization is a huge aspect of that relationship banking. Or in fact, relationship full stop, doesn't have to be about banking.
Yeah.
And if I look at my own personal preference, and I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, my ideal aim of a relationship with my bank is to never see a human, never deal with a human. In an ideal world, it'd all be on my phone. I just don't need to deal with a human.
For banking or everything?
Let's go with everything if possible. But then
Thanks for being here today.
I've actually come out in public. It's quite scary. But then the counter to that is we have loads of customers who actually the trip to a branch is such an experience because it engages with people. So people who live alone. One of the you talk about the benefits of relationship banking. It's not always about the banking experience. The fact that we understand how people bank and how they move their money around and how they interact. It also allows us to do things like protect vulnerable customers, because there are a large percentage of vulnerable customers who clearly that might be their only daily interaction going to a branch.
Right.
And it's interesting, I was observing, because we're here in the US, you have a much bigger branch-based culture. I think you pass loads of branches in the street. The UK is pulling back from branches because people aren't actually visiting them. So it's a catch-22 around, they're just genuinely not that popular.
Some of it in the US, and I think it's this way in some other countries, has to do with the transactions and the movements from certain accounts. Like, of course, in the US, you want to leave any cash you have in a bank that you're not investing. You would prefer to have it in a savings account so you can get interest. But there's federal guidelines of you're only allowed to do so many online transactions out of or into that account during the month, which kind of forces you to go into the branch. And I gotta say, I mean, I know this makes me a little old school. Probably once a month I do stop into my local branch, and I appreciate that when I go there they know me. For me, that is part of the relationship.
Yeah, and the key thing is that personalization. The experience you're looking for is different from the experience I want from a bank.
And I can actually tell you, I've banked, this is not the investment, this is just the business banking I do. And there's a branch in my town in Austin, and I've gotten to know the GM and the personal banker. And sometimes I just stop in and do my transaction because I actually really enjoy these people.
But something you both touched on is multiple bank accounts, multiple relationships.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely, so I'm assuming the US is exactly the same as the UK. One of the parts that NatWest is very strong on is an open banking culture. Yeah. So exposing everything through APIs. We don't want to drive all of our customers to only bank uniquely with us. Yeah. Right. What we want to do is go, if you bank with us and 3-4 other banks, how can we create a single pane of glass? How can we
So you want to know the whole customer and incorporate not only across different accounts in your institution, but help them look at their whole portfolio.
It's the reality of the industry. Most people now have multiple banks. I should be very clear, what you can't do is walk into our branch and see competitor balances, for example. Right. What you can do is we expose access to our accounts if you sign up to it and do all the credentials, so that you can aggregate your position.
Like wiring between the accounts and stuff like that.
So it's absolutely important that customers get to do
I know we're hyper-focused on banking for good reason, but one of the most interesting things probably in CX and in these experience in building relationships, though, is how much things not in banking, not in finance, not in your industry are actually impacting. For instance, whether it's how I drink my coffee, right? A lot of people here in the States, the coffee may not be the best at that Starbucks company, right? You can disagree or agree with me on that, but for instance, but the app.
I don't drink coffee, but I know where you're going. Go. Sorry.
You don't drink coffee?
I don't at all. Sorry.
But the app itself has created in this experience that people have become very, you pre-order it, it knows what you like. You've got these reward programs, and my point is in anywhere you go, you can get this really amazing sort of experience. You can move money in, you move money out, you can gift people, cards, you can buy someone. And what I'm saying is I start to look at these other industries have started to create a standard where you're going, can the banking industry compete with this, for instance?
But you have tons of data.
Well, and think you've hit the nail on the head. We don't have tons. It's very well managed. Thank you. The critical thing is what we do have is we have insights.
Right.
And traditionally, the banking industry, and I will treat it as a generic, banking industry traditionally has underutilized that data. And I think probably for fear of interfering in people's lives, as opposed to now there's a greater desire for give me insight, support me, as you say, give me an experience that's tailored to where I'm at. Mm-hmm. If I'm about to buy a car, then you should be able to interject in that conversation, say how can we help with that transaction because we understand through the data where you're at. And I think that's another part of that personalization journey, definitely.
Yeah, and so the business strategy and the technology dovetails here, and we know that mainframes are huge in the financial sector, right? I mean, if you think about the volumes of data, the speed that it can be processed over, the scale, the security, availability. The trick is to capitalize on that investment and drive and derive the insights from it to drive that relationship and the business value.
Yeah, and to your point, I think Dan, maybe you said we've got lots of legacy as an industry, so we do. So the
lots of value.
Well, effectively we don't have legacy. What we have is heritage. We have stuff that's very mature. Has been matured over years, therefore is very resilient, very high performant, etc. So we know a lot of information. And to your point, the critical thing here is how you can take that fast, rapid channel development and expose the value of the data at the back end. So our sort of strategy, as loads of other banks are the same, is about taking our core services. So I have in the core of the bank about 95% of our customers' data and our customers' knowledge. And we use that to expose it through APIs, and we refactor that as much as possible into microservice architecture, event-based architecture, share the knowledge we have so that those channels can access that readily. It's not about replacing one with the other, it's about making sure you have a seamless flow from rapidly developed channels that can react to trends or needs, but expose the value of that long invested in core of the bank.
It's interesting. I said technical debt, but maybe we should say technical assets.
It is.
If we're going to stay on the financial parallels, right?
It's value and assets that needs to be harvested, reinvested, derive the insight from it to drive greater value.
I like they said that, but I also want to turn to something that I think we really can't ignore here, and that's artificial intelligence. That's AI, right? With the advent, and not just generative. Look, AI has been around a while, and companies have been doing things to, whether it's been machine learning and business intelligence, whether it's been recommendation engines and filtering systems. AI is not new, but I think in the last year you would agree it has come on at an incredible pace, and it puts pressure and creates opportunity in your space. Talk a little bit about how you see now taking all this data and implementing AI and really driving the next wave of relationship banking in a digital world.
Yeah, so as you say, it's ironic because it's accelerating so fast. It's still early days in generative AI, for example, and yet it feels like we're years into it because it's moving so fast. I think there's lots of different perspectives. So from an infrastructure point of view, so I primarily look after the core of the bank. AI is going to accelerate how we do resilience monitoring and availability and alerting and everything else that says how we make sure we have a resilient service to protect our customers and our customers' data.
Which that has value in of itself.
It does.
The relationship with the customer. When you go to do banking and it's not available, that hurts the relationship. So even though the customer isn't thinking about, I care about resiliency and availability, when it's not available, they care.
Well, so step one in any banking relationship is trust.
Yeah.
Do I absolutely will it be there when I need it to be there? When I walk in the room and flick the light switch, will the lights come on?
Right.
So step one, AI is very visible in that, but not in the, as you say, the sort of generative AI way. However, we're starting to see natural language queries, so we can start to look through log analysis, etc. You then lift it up a level. Across the US, I think there's about $2 trillion of losses across financial crime in the US alone last year. When you look at that, what's that developing across fraud and financial crime industry in terms of monitoring and it's an evolution of previous machine learning. To your point around asset or threat, Clearly there's risks in there in terms of decisions that are made. How can you authenticate and audit the decision was made and it was valid and made in the right context? So we definitely see an AI being more and more prevalent in that. And then all the way through to our channels. So if you look at NatWest, we rely very heavily on, we've got a natural language chatbot interface, and that will continue to grow and does continue to grow. And I think the principal thing about, taking it all the way back to that, what is relationship banking to us question, it's absolutely critical that we are wherever our customers are. So if our customers are on social media, then the bank needs to be somehow in that flow, not expect them to break out of social media, then go to a website and do something separate. So I guess AI will play a more and more inclusive part in that conversation through that sort of conversational interface.
So I appreciate AI in the fraud detection and all that kind of stuff, but what I find frustrating, and it impacts me with my own financial institution relative to the relationship, is like if I'm sending a wire and they have this process that, hey, if you get the wire out by 3 p.m., the funds will be transferred the same day. So I do it at 10 a.m. What I find frustrating isn't that they flag it for fraud, it's when sometimes they don't call me or send me a message till 2:30 or 3 o'clock. And I'm like, oh man, if you had just flagged it and interacted with me right away, this would still go same day. So I think there's great opportunities and value that can be delivered through these technologies, but then how you administer it and how timely you are and all that is part of the overall relationship.
But I think you're right, it's an opportunity, because I think historically, fraud, so ironically it happens to me in the US. If I go to a gas station in the US, that's when my credit card stops. Because we don't expect you to be in the US, somebody's clearly stolen all your details.
Well, no, and that's clearly how they would steal from you, by buying gas.
Yes, well, that's usually what I say when I phone
tells you something about the price of gas in the UK, because people would come to the US, buy a ton of gas, and then fly it back to the UK.
Oh yeah, hand luggage.
Right.
Yeah. So clearly, but you try really hard as I guess an informed customer, because I know what's happening behind the scenes, to go, you're actually protecting me, and as much as it's frustrating, you're protecting me. But to your point, the opportunity now is we can be sharper. Well, we shouldn't need to do that, because if AI was interjecting that conversation, it would know that the month before I bought an airline ticket to the US.
Right.
So you get to that point where the knowledge starts to create a better customer experience.
Yeah, there's little like, modes of improvement that could be implemented. I'm actually like right over here in the Uber. I got a call from my banker asking me to confirm a wire because I've set guidelines for how much my team can, and so they call, well, this is above that threshold, and it's, by the way, it was going to Greece, and they're like, are you sure? And the point was, I am glad. I'm glad they called. At the same time, I think with something like AI, you could start to see traditional behavior, and maybe that could be as simple as a text where I could have just hit one instead of having to take a call, because when your bank calls, you're like, why are you calling me? I want to pivot to something because we only have a few minutes left, but I want to talk about culture for a minute, because we're talking a lot about the external experience and what we're talking a lot about ourselves. But I also want to think about, like, as you're building NatWest, as you're building a company and the industry is building, AI is kind of both an opportunity and a threat. Technology as a whole, by the way, automation, it's not just AI, but in order to stay modern, to deliver these great customer experiences, you need the people within your team, within the organization to buy in. How are you sort of framing those conversations with you within your leadership to really get them to buy into things that to some extent may completely change their jobs, and in some cases may create risk of displacing jobs, and of course we will create them too. And I know that's always important to point, but how are you driving those conversations?
So I think, you're absolutely right. There's always the counter to any opportunity, there's always that threat. And part of it is, so from the top down, from a business strategy point of view, we are very, very consistent around the part that we are a relationship bank trying to build a digital economy, trying to digitize everything we do. And it's about building those deep relationships. We spend a lot of time pushing partner relationships because it's an ecosystem, and we talk a lot about innovation. So there's the excitement of, you're not playing with the thing you were playing with last week, now you're getting to play with the new thing, you get to evolve, you get to experiment. There's a huge culture of experimentation. That in itself is always a challenge with the feel free to fail multiple times, because one of those failures is going to be the one that moves the bank materially forward. So that's been a journey, trying to get people to accept, I'll try and I'll fail. But we're getting there. In terms of the evolution of jobs and roles in the bank, AI has been a great example, because if you hold a town hall and you ask people what their opinion is, there's a series of people going, is my job getting replaced by a robot? And we're trying hard to avoid Skynet, because that's the extreme of the conversation. But there's others who will quite happily go, this is going to augment my job.
It's going to
take away the
easier, it's gonna
boring
make it
elements of
better.
my job. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that, there's old stats around when you start college, 4 years later, the jobs won't be the same jobs you started college with. I think that just means it's compressed now. It'll be 12 months, it'll be 9 months.
So it's about having a clear strategy, making sure that there's awareness across the whole team so that everybody can be aligned. And then, you've got to get those that don't see the positives to become aware of them, and hopefully the others who get it, it kind of gets infectious across the team.
If all you can do is spark curiosity, that's
Yeah.
a cultural switch.
Agreed.
Because people are curious around where it can go. And a lot of the where it can go hasn't been discovered yet, because it's the power of it hasn't yet been untapped.
Yeah.
So we're looking at AI across things like legal contracts, and can you take away some of the risk as you assess legal contracts? That in itself is probably not the most valuable part of our role from a legal team point of view. So let's use the AI to sort of take away the bits that devalue roles, and give them access to the stuff that really lets them take their education, their knowledge and experience, and use it in a more valuable way.
Fabulous conversation. It's been a pleasure having you here, Iain. I really enjoyed it. We covered a lot of ground. Why don't you take us home, Daniel?
Yeah, there is a ton of pace, and the trajectory in your industry and is very, very exciting. And from both myself and Greg from the Main Scoop, I think it'd be fun to bring you back. I'd like to talk to you again in about a year.
Absolutely.
Because I want to understand, like I said, both this cultural shift, and then of course, I genuinely believe this industry is going to see a very significant shift with things like NLP and Gen AI being built into every interaction we have. So thanks for joining us on the Main Scoop.
Thanks very much.
So we covered a lot of ground here today, as we mentioned, and of course the innovation, customer experience, both inside with your employees and outside with us, the consumers, is very important. I think highly regulated industries, Greg, always are indicative of where the rest of the market can go. Sometimes industries like retail can drive faster innovation because there's less restrictions, but at the same time, with the
They don't have to color within the lines.
But with the era of PII and you seeing the world, around security, around safety, around getting companies to feel safe and secure, to be able to deliver value to both shareholders and stakeholders, it's going to be really important to get this Gen AI thing right. And in the end, it's only one AI. It's just one thing is AI. And overall, though, it's about getting the infrastructure right. It's about getting your systems right, getting your software right. And
It's about having the right business strategy, about being aligned on the value that you're trying to drive to your customer or as a business model, and then putting the right technology in place to do that.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be learned here on the Main Scoop from all these great guests we have, and hopefully everybody out there will keep joining us here on the Main Scoop, tune into all the episodes, because Greg and I have more great guests planned, and we hope you will stick with us. But for this episode, it's time to say goodbye.
See you next time.